One act of kindness bonded him to an alien queen forever. But her love is a prison he can't escape, and leaving her might cost them both everything. You know, Daniel had always been the kind of guy who liked his peace and quiet. At 32 years old, he was perfectly content living alone in his little house tucked away in the Oregon countryside. He worked from home as a software developer, had his routines down to a science, and honestly, he liked it that way. No drama, no complications, just him and his computer and the occasional deer wandering through his backyard. UFOs? Aliens? All that Area 51 stuff? Daniel thought it was complete nonsense. His college roommate used to watch those alien documentaries all night long, and Daniel would just shake his head and laugh. "If aliens were real, don't you think we'd know by now?" he'd say. Yeah, well, that confidence didn't age well. It was a Tuesday night in the middle of August. Daniel remembers it was a Tuesday because he'd just finished a really boring work meeting about quarterly reports or something equally mind-numbing. He'd made himself some instant ramen, watched half an episode of a cooking show, and headed to bed around 11. Nothing special, just another regular night. Around 2 in the morning, Daniel woke up to what he thought was thunder. Except thunder doesn't usually come with a light so bright it turns your bedroom into midday. His whole room lit up like someone had parked the sun outside his window. The sound that came next wasn't thunder either. It was this deep, rumbling boom that rattled his teeth and made his ears ring. Daniel jumped out of bed so fast he nearly tripped over his own feet. His heart was hammering in his chest as he ran to the window. At first he couldn't see anything except spots dancing in his vision from that crazy bright light. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw smoke rising from his backyard. Thick, dark smoke mixed with something that looked almost purple. Now, a smart person would probably call the fire department, right? Or at least grab a fire extinguisher. But Daniel was running on pure adrenaline and curiosity. He threw on his slippers, didn't even bother with a jacket over his t-shirt and pajama pants, and ran outside. The first thing that hit him was the smell. It wasn't like burning wood or electrical fire or anything he recognized. It was sharp and almost sweet, like ozone mixed with something floral. Weird doesn't even begin to cover it. His backyard was a mess. His tool shed, which he'd built himself 2 summers ago, now had a massive dent in the side. And right in the middle of his vegetable garden, where his tomatoes used to be, was a crater. Not a huge one, maybe 10 feet across, but deep enough that he couldn't see the bottom in the dark. Daniel grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. That's when he saw it. Sitting in the crater was something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. It was shaped kind of like an egg, but longer, maybe the size of a compact car. The surface wasn't metal, though. It looked almost organic, like it was made of some kind of shell or bone, with these glowing veins running through it. The veins pulsed with a soft blue-purple light like a heartbeat. Okay, Daniel said out loud to himself, because talking to yourself is totally normal when you're losing your mind. Okay, this is not happening. I'm dreaming. I ate bad ramen and now I'm having a nightmare. He pinched himself. It hurt. Still dreaming, he thought. In dreams you can't feel pain, right? Except apparently you can, because this was definitely real. Before Daniel could decide whether to run back inside and hide under his bed or call someone, the thing in the crater made a sound. A hissing, cracking sound like ice breaking on a frozen lake. The glowing veins got brighter, pulsing faster, and then a seam appeared down the middle of the egg thing. Steam or smoke or something poured out of the opening seam. It was that same purplish color, and it smelled even stronger now, sweet and chemical and completely alien. Daniel took a step back, his brain screaming at him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. It's like watching a car crash. You know you should look away, but you just can't. The egg thing split open completely, and that's when Daniel's brain basically short-circuited. She stepped out of the smoke like some kind of angel, except angels probably don't look like this. She was tall, way taller than Daniel, probably close to 7 feet. Her skin had this silvery shimmer to it, like someone had dusted her with metallic paint, but it looked natural, like that was just her actual skin tone. Her eyes were the really freaky part. They were large, larger than human eyes, and completely black except for these tiny points of light that looked exactly like stars. Like someone had captured a piece of the night sky and put it in her eyes. Her hair, if you could call it that, flowed down past her shoulders. It looked like it was made of thin crystal strands or fiber optic cables, shifting colors from silver to blue to purple. The really weird thing? It was moving on its own, floating and swaying like she was underwater, even though there wasn't any wind. She was wearing something too, but Daniel couldn't tell if it was clothes or armor or part of her body. It looked alive, shifting and rippling across her torso and limbs, this dark material with the same glowing veins as her ship. For about 5 seconds, Daniel and this alien being just stared at each other. He was trying to remember how to breathe, and she looked like she was trying to figure out if he was dangerous or not. Then she collapsed. 1 second she was standing there looking like some kind of warrior goddess from another planet, and the next second she just crumpled forward. Daniel's instincts kicked in before his brain could tell him what a terrible idea this was. He rushed forward and caught her before she hit the ground. She was heavy. Not fat, just dense, like her bones were made of something heavier than human bones. Daniel struggled to keep her from falling completely, and that's when he noticed she was hurt. There was a gash across her shoulder, cutting through that living armor stuff she wore. Instead of red blood, something that looked like liquid silver mixed with tiny sparks of light was oozing out. It was the weirdest, most beautiful, most terrifying thing Daniel had ever seen. She was trying to say something. Her lips were moving and sounds were coming out, but it wasn't any language Daniel had ever heard. It was musical, full of tones and harmonics that human vocal cords probably couldn't make. But even though he couldn't understand the words, he could see it in her eyes. She was scared. She was in pain, and she was asking for help. Daniel had a choice to make right there in that crater. He could run back to his house, lock the doors, call the police or the military or whoever you're supposed to call when an alien crashes in your backyard. That would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But looking into those star-filled eyes, seeing her hurt and vulnerable and completely at his mercy, Daniel couldn't do it. Whether she was from another planet or another dimension or his own fractured mind, she needed help. And Daniel had never been the kind of person who could turn his back on someone who needed him. "Okay," he said softly, more to calm himself than her. "Okay, it's all right. I'm going to help you. Can you walk?" She probably didn't understand his words, but she seemed to get the meaning. She tried to stand on her own, wobbled, and Daniel had to wrap his arm around her waist to steady her. Together, they climbed out of the crater, leaving the broken ship behind. Getting her into his house was an adventure. She was so tall that she had to duck under the doorframe. Her crystal hair kept brushing against the ceiling, making little tinkling sounds like wind chimes. Daniel guided her through his living room, past his confused cat who took one look at the alien and decided to hide under the couch, and toward the guest bedroom. But when he tried to settle her on the guest bed, she made this sound. It was distressed, almost panicked. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength and pulled him back, through gestures and this weird feeling that suddenly appeared in the back of his mind, like someone else's emotions were bleeding into his own. She made it clear she didn't want to be alone. "You want to stay in my room?" Daniel asked, even though he knew she couldn't understand English. But again, she seemed to get it. She nodded, and that feeling in his mind got calmer, more settled. Daniel didn't know what else to do. He was running on autopilot at this point, his brain still trying to process the fact that there was an actual alien in his house. He grabbed his first aid kit, even though he had no idea if bandages and antiseptic would work on alien biology. He helped her to his bedroom, and she immediately went to his bed, sitting on one side like she'd done it 100 times before. Daniel cleaned her wound as best he could. The liquid silver stuff had stopped flowing, and underneath it, he could see the gash starting to close on its own. "Okay, so aliens had crazy healing abilities. Good to know." "You should rest," Daniel said, even though talking to her felt ridiculous. She watched him with those intense, starlit eyes as he backed toward the door. "I'll just sleep on the couch and we can figure this out in the morning." But she grabbed his hand before he could leave. Not roughly, but firmly enough to stop him. And then that feeling came again, stronger this time. It wasn't words exactly, but he understood it anyway. She wanted him to stay. She felt safer with him there. Daniel looked at his bed, then at her, then at his bed again. This was insane. This was completely, absolutely insane. But he was exhausted. She was clearly not going to hurt him. And honestly, what else? The next morning, Daniel woke up to someone staring at him. Not just glancing over, but full-on, intense, unwavering staring. He opened his eyes and nearly jumped out of his skin when he found her face about a foot away from his. Those starlit eyes locked onto him like he was the most fascinating thing in the universe. "Good morning to you, too," Daniel mumbled, his heart still racing from the wake-up scare. He sat up slowly, and she mirrored his movement, never breaking eye contact. It was getting a little creepy, honestly. In the daylight streaming through his bedroom window, Daniel could see her more clearly. Her silver skin had different tones to it. Darker in some places, almost iridescent in others. The wound on her shoulder was completely gone, not even a scar, like it had never happened. Her crystal hair caught the sunlight and scattered it into tiny rainbows across his walls. She was still wearing that weird living armor, and Daniel realized he probably needed to find her some regular clothes at some point. But first things first, are you hungry? He asked, miming eating. She tilted her head, confused. Daniel tried again, pointing to his mouth and making exaggerated chewing motions. He felt ridiculous, but communication was important. She didn't respond to his gestures, but suddenly he felt something. It was like a warm pressure in his mind, not painful, just present, and with it came a feeling. Not quite words, but close enough. He got the sense that she understood what he was asking, and yes, she could eat human food. Okay, that's new, Daniel said, touching his forehead. Are you in my head right now? Is that what's happening? The pressure increased slightly, and he got a feeling that was unmistakably yes. This was going to take some getting used to. Daniel got out of bed and headed to the kitchen, and she followed him like a shadow. Not just followed, she stayed within arm's reach the entire time. When he stopped, she stopped. When he moved, she moved. It was like having a 7-foot-tall, silver-skinned, telepathic bodyguard who refused to give him any personal space. He made scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and set 2 plates on the kitchen table. She sat down across from him and stared at the food with curiosity. Then she picked up the fork, examined it like it was some kind of alien artifact, which from her perspective it probably was, and tried to eat the eggs with it. The first attempt resulted in eggs on the table. The second attempt got eggs on her lap. By the third try, she'd figured it out, and Daniel couldn't help but smile. It was weirdly charming, watching this clearly advanced being from another world struggle with basic silverware. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Though calling it a routine made it sound way more normal than it actually was. Daniel would wake up to her staring at him. They'd have breakfast together, with her watching his every move like she was studying him. He'd try to work on his computer, and she'd sit right next to him, sometimes so close their shoulders touched, watching the screen with intense concentration. The really weird part was that he was starting to understand her better. Not through words, but through that mental connection that seemed to be getting stronger every day. He'd think about something, and he'd get feelings back from her that were almost like responses. It was like learning a new language without any grammar books or lessons, just pure instinct and emotion. One night, about 5 days after she'd crashed into his life, Daniel was lying in bed, his bed that he now shared every single night with an alien, because that was apparently his life now, and he decided to try something. He focused on a question in his mind, trying to project it toward her the way she seemed to project feelings toward him. Who are you? For a moment, nothing happened. Then images flooded his mind, so vivid and real it was like watching a movie in ultra-high definition. He saw a planet, massive and beautiful, with crystalline structures that stretched into purple skies. Twin suns hung overhead, bathing everything in golden and amber light. There were cities not like human cities, but elegant towers and spiraling structures that looked grown rather than built. And he saw her, standing on a platform overlooking thousands of beings like her, all of them looking up at her with reverence. She was wearing elaborate armor, more ornate than what she had now, and she held herself with absolute authority, a queen or something close to it. The images shifted, became darker. He saw conflict, violence, betrayal. He saw her running, fighting her way to her ship, launching into space with enemies pursuing her. He saw the desperation in her face as she pushed her ship to its limits, jumping through space in ways that clearly damaged the vessel. And then the crash, the impact, the fear, and then him. Daniel saw himself from her perspective, standing at the edge of the crater looking terrified but kind. He saw himself helping her, bringing her inside, cleaning her wound. And he felt what she'd felt in those moments, relief, gratitude, and something else. Something that made his chest feel tight and his breath catch. She had bonded to him. More images came, explanations without words. Her species, whatever they were, formed deep connections through proximity and vulnerability. Sharing space, sharing rest, sharing trust, these things created bonds that went beyond friendship or alliance. They were soul-deep, biological, written into the very fabric of how her people loved and connected. By letting her into his home, into his bedroom, into his bed. Daniel had unknowingly accepted something sacred in her culture. He'd initiated a bond that her species considered unbreakable. "Wait," Daniel said out loud, sitting up in bed. "Are you saying that just by letting you sleep here I accidentally—" "What, married you?" The feeling he got back wasn't quite marriage, but it was close. Bonded, linked. Hers, and she was his. The emotions that came with that feeling were intense. Fierce protectiveness, deep affection, and an overwhelming need to never be separated from him. "Oh boy," Daniel muttered, running his hands through his hair. "This is bad. This is really bad." But even as he said it, he felt her distress through their connection. She thought he was rejecting her, that he was upset about the bond, and feeling her pain made his own chest ache in response. No, he said quickly. "I'm not mad at you. It's not your fault. I didn't know. You couldn't have told me even if you wanted to." She moved closer to him in the bed, and he felt a question forming in his mind. Did he want her to leave? Could she break the bond? More images came, answering his unspoken question about whether the bond could be broken. He saw alien figures in pain, their bodies weakening, their light fading. Breaking a bond once formed was possible but devastating. It would hurt her, maybe even destroy her, and he'd feel it too now that they were connected. "No," Daniel said softly. "Don't even think about that. We'll figure this out." She settled against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and he felt her contentment wash through their bond. This was what she wanted, what her entire being craved, being close to him, knowing he was safe and near. Daniel lay back down, staring at the ceiling as this alien queen cuddled up to him like he was her personal security blanket. His life had officially become a science fiction story, and he had no idea how to handle it. The next few weeks were a crash course in just how serious her attachment to him was. She didn't just want to be near him, she needed to be near him. If he went to the bathroom, she'd wait right outside the door. If he went to get the mail, she'd watch from the window, her distress growing with every second he was out of sight. At night, she'd wrap herself around him like he might disappear if she didn't hold on tight enough. At first, Daniel tried to be understanding. She was alone on an alien planet, bonded to the only person she knew, traumatized from whatever had happened on her homeworld. Of course she was clingy. But as time went on, it started to feel less like comfort-seeking and more like possession. She learned English fast, way faster than any human could learn a language. Within 2 weeks, she was speaking in full sentences, though her voice had this musical quality that made every word sound like part of a song. Her name, she told him, was something his human mouth couldn't quite pronounce, but the closest approximation was Seraphine. "Seraphine," Daniel repeated. "That's actually really pretty." Her eyes literally lit up when he said her name, glowing brighter for a moment. The feeling he got through their bond was pure joy, but knowing her name and being able to talk to her didn't solve his problems. If anything, it made them worse, because now she could express exactly how much she needed him to never leave her side. "You are mine," she told him one evening, saying it like it was the most natural, obvious thing in the world. "And I am yours. This is how it should be." Daniel tried to explain that humans didn't work that way, that he needed space and independence and time with other people. But every time he brought it up, he felt her panic spike through their bond, felt her fear of abandonment hit him like a physical blow. His work started suffering. He'd be on video calls, and Seraphine would be visible in the background, or he'd have to mute himself because she was asking him questions. His boss had started making comments about his friend who was always around. Daniel had introduced her as a foreign exchange student staying with him, which was technically true if you considered foreign to mean from another planet. His friends were getting suspicious too. He'd canceled so many plans that they'd stopped inviting him to things. His sister kept calling, demanding to know why he was being so weird and distant. And every time he tried to make plans to see people, Seraphine would find a reason why he couldn't go. "I don't feel well," she'd say, even though she was perfectly healthy. "Please stay. I need you." Or she'd sabotage his plans more directly. His car mysteriously wouldn't start. His phone would lose signal. Once his front door literally wouldn't open, and he later found out she'd used some kind of alien technology to seal it shut. "You cannot leave," she'd tell him, not understanding why he was upset. "You are everything to me. Without you, I am nothing." It should have been romantic, maybe, in a really twisted way. This beautiful, powerful being from another world who thought he was her entire universe. But it wasn't romantic. It was suffocating. Daniel was becoming a prisoner in his own home, and the worst part was that he couldn't even be properly angry about it. Every time frustration built up in his chest, he'd feel her emotions through their bond, her genuine love and devotion, and his anger would deflate. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She just didn't understand that what she was doing was wrong. 2 months after the crash, Daniel realized he'd lost his job. They'd sent him an email saying his performance had declined too much. Too many missed meetings, too many distractions. He stared at the termination letter on his computer screen and felt something inside him break. "Seraphine," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to talk." She looked up from the alien device she'd been tinkering with, something she'd salvaged from her wrecked ship. "Yes, beloved. You have to let me have my own life," Daniel said. "I know you don't mean to, but you're controlling everything I do. I lost my job because of this." "You don't need that job," she said, confusion clear in her voice. "I can provide for us. My technology can—" "That's not the point." Daniel's voice rose, and he felt her flinch through their bond. He took a breath, tried again. "It's not about money or providing. It's about me being my own person. About having friends and a career and a life that isn't just this." Silence fell between them. Through their bond, Daniel felt something he'd never felt from her before. Anger. Real, genuine anger. "You think I want to be like this?" Seraphine's voice was quiet but intense. "You think I enjoy feeling like I'll die if you leave the room? This bond, it controls me as much as you feel controlled by me." "Then help me set boundaries," Daniel pleaded. "Help me figure out how we can both be okay." But Seraphine stood up, her full height making her tower over him. The lights in the house flickered. Small objects on the shelves started to rattle. "I am a queen," she said, and for the first time Daniel heard the authority in her voice, the power she must have held on her world. "I commanded armies. I ruled systems. And now I am reduced to this, begging the man I love to simply stay with me." "I'm not asking you to beg," Daniel said, standing his ground even though the display of power was frightening. "I'm asking you to compromise." The word hung in the air between them. Compromise. Something that required both of them to give up something they wanted for the sake of the relationship. Seraphine's anger faded, replaced by something sadder. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "The bond, it makes me need you in ways I cannot control." And there it was, the truth they'd both been avoiding. They were stuck together, bound by alien biology and circumstances neither of them had chosen, and neither of them knew how to make it work. That night, for the first time since she'd arrived, Daniel slept on the couch. He could feel Seraphine's distress through their bond, feel her lying awake in his bed, confused and hurt. But he couldn't go back. If he gave in every time she was upset, nothing would ever change. He had to find a solution, or this beautiful, impossible, suffocating relationship was going to destroy them both. Daniel woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a headache that felt like someone was hammering nails into his skull. At first he thought it was just from sleeping in a weird position, but then he realized it was coming through the bond. Seraphine's distress was so intense it was giving him a physical headache. He dragged himself off the couch and found her exactly where he'd left her, curled up in his bed, staring at the empty space where he should have been. Her eyes weren't glowing like usual. They looked dim, almost gray. "Seraphine," he said from the doorway. She turned to look at him, and the relief that flooded through their bond was so powerful, it made his knees weak. She was off the bed in seconds, crossing the room to reach him, her hands cupping his face like she needed to confirm he was real. "You stayed away," she whispered, "all night." I was just in the other room," Daniel said, but even as he said it, he felt how inadequate the words were. To her, him being in another room might as well have been him being on another planet. This wasn't working. Sleeping separately wasn't going to fix anything, it was just punishing them both. But something had to change. Over the next few days, Daniel did something he should have done weeks ago. He started researching. Not about aliens or UFOs, that was useless, but about codependency, about unhealthy attachment, about how to set boundaries with someone you cared about but who was suffocating you. He found articles about enmeshment, about losing yourself in a relationship, about the importance of maintaining individual identity. He read about toxic relationships and how love, even genuine love, could become destructive if it wasn't balanced with respect and space. Seraphine noticed what he was reading. She could see through his eyes when their bond was strong enough, could sense his thoughts if he wasn't careful to shield them. "You think what we have is toxic," she said one afternoon, her voice flat. Daniel looked up from his laptop. "I think what we have is complicated. And yes, some parts of it aren't healthy. For you," she said. "It's not healthy for you." "For both of us," Daniel corrected. "Seraphine, you had a whole life before you came here. You were a leader, you had responsibilities, you had purpose. Now what do you do all day? You follow me around and make sure I don't leave your sight. Is that really what you want your life to be?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I had everything on my world. Power, respect, influence. But I was alone. I was always alone. Every connection I made was political, strategic. No one really saw me until you." Daniel's heart hurt hearing that. "I do see you. And I care about you. More than I probably should given how crazy this whole situation is. But that's exactly why we need to figure out how to do this better." "How?" Seraphine asked, and she sounded so lost. "My biology, my very nature, it drives me to bond this way. I cannot simply turn it off." "I'm not asking you to turn it off," Daniel said. "I'm asking you to work with me to find a middle ground." It started small. Daniel would leave the house for 10 minutes to check the mail, and Seraphine would practice staying inside, working through her anxiety without him. Those 10 minutes felt like hours for both of them. Him feeling her distress through the bond, her fighting every instinct to run after him. But he'd come back, and she'd see that he kept his promise, that leaving didn't mean abandoning her. Then 15 minutes, then 20, then an hour to go to the grocery store. The grocery store trip was rough. Daniel had to stop in the parking lot twice because the anxiety coming through the bond was so intense, he could barely think. But he finished shopping and came home to find Seraphine had torn 3 pillows apart in her stress, feathers covering the living room like snow. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I couldn't control it. I felt like my skin was crawling, like something terrible was happening to you." "But nothing terrible happened," Daniel pointed out gently. "I went to the store, bought food, and came home. Just like I said I would." She nodded, but he could tell she didn't really believe it. One successful trip didn't undo the bone-deep conviction that being apart was dangerous. They kept trying, though. Daniel would go for short walks around his property, gradually increasing the distance. Seraphine would work on projects she'd started, trying to reverse engineer some of her technology to create things that might be useful. She was brilliant when she focused, able to do things with Earth materials that should have been impossible. She'd built a device that could charge any battery instantly, another that could purify water using nothing but light. Once, just to show off, she'd created a small holographic display that could project 3-dimensional images in the air. "You could change the world with this stuff," Daniel told her, watching a holographic bird fly around his living room. "I don't care about the world," Seraphine said. "I care about you." And there was the problem, summed up in one sentence. Her entire existence had narrowed down to one person, and that was too much pressure for anyone to bear. Things came to a head about 3 weeks into their boundary-setting attempts. Daniel's friend Kevin called, someone he'd known since college, asking if Daniel wanted to grab dinner and catch up. It had been months since they'd seen each other. "I should go," Daniel told Seraphine. "It'll be good for me to see a friend." He felt her immediate resistance through the bond, felt her scrambling for reasons why he couldn't go. But instead of voicing them, she bit her lip and nodded. "Okay," she said, and the word clearly cost her something. Daniel was proud of her. This was progress. He got dressed, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. That's when his car wouldn't start. He tried 3 times, and the engine just made a clicking sound. Daniel popped the hood and immediately saw the problem. Several wires had been disconnected, and not by accident. They'd been carefully, deliberately removed. He walked back into the house and found Seraphine pretending to read a book he knew she'd finished days ago. "Did you sabotage my car?" Daniel asked. She didn't look up. "I don't know what you mean." "Seraphine, look at me." She did, and he saw guilt in her eyes, but also defiance. "You said you wouldn't lie to me. Part of trust is honesty, remember?" "I panicked," she admitted. "I know I promised to try, but when you were actually about to leave, I couldn't bear it. So I used my tools to disable your vehicle." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to stay calm even though anger was building in his chest. "Fix it." "No." "Excuse me?" Seraphine stood up, and that regal bearing came back, the queen showing through. "I said no. You can be angry with me, you can sleep on the couch again, but I will not help you leave me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Daniel's voice rose. You can't just control everything I do because you're scared. I am not just scared, Seraphine said, her own voice getting louder. I am bonded to you in ways your species doesn't have words for. When you leave, it feels like part of my soul is being torn away. You ask me to ignore that, to just be fine with pain because you want to see your friend. Yes, Daniel shouted. Yes, I'm asking you to deal with some discomfort so I can have a normal life. The house started shaking. The lights flickered and died. Small objects lifted off shelves and hung in the air. Seraphine's eyes blazed with light, her crystal hair flowing around her like she was underwater. And Daniel realized he'd never actually seen her truly angry before. Normal? She said. And her voice echoed with harmonics that made the windows rattle. There is nothing normal about this situation. There is nothing normal about an exiled queen bonded to a human who wants to pretend that bond doesn't exist. I'm not pretending it doesn't exist, Daniel shot back, refusing to be intimidated even though the display of power was terrifying. I'm trying to find a way to live with it that doesn't destroy me. And what about what it's doing to me? Seraphine demanded. You speak of boundaries and space and independence, but have you once asked what I need? Have you once considered that maybe, just maybe, I'm barely holding myself together? That stopped Daniel cold. Through the bond, he felt it then. Really felt what she'd been hiding from him. The constant anxiety, the fear that gripped her every moment they weren't touching. The way her mind screamed danger and abandonment whenever he was out of sight. She'd been fighting a war inside herself every single day, trying to give him the space he demanded while her biology told her she was making a fatal mistake. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel asked quietly. Because you would have stayed, Seraphine said, and the tears streaming down her face glowed faintly in the dark room. You would have given up what you needed to make me comfortable, and I would have let you, and eventually you would have hated me for it. The floating objects slowly lowered back to their places. The lights flickered back on. Seraphine sank to the floor, her head in her hands, and she looked small despite her size. Vulnerable, broken. Daniel sat down next to her, not touching, not yet, just being close. This isn't working, he said finally. I know, she whispered. We can't keep hurting each other like this. I know. So what do we do? Seraphine looked at him with those star-filled eyes. I don't know. In my culture, bonds like this are celebrated. Two people becoming one, never apart, always together.